Microphone check. We are live. This computer's gonna close. There we go. Bear with me while I get this space situated. Making sure the computer's at a decent distance. There we go. Should be good right there. Welcome back to another session. Welcome back to another session. The Sun Studies and Invincible Truth. We welcome you back with open arms. We were not public last week on Mother's Day. So I thank you for being here today. Thank you for joining me. We're going to conduct another session of Sun Studies. I won't take up too much of your time. As you could probably hear, uh, I'm not in the best of health, but we're going to keep it pushing. We're going to keep it moving. And we're here. So welcome. Pray you are healthy, striving towards health, full and complete health, healthy mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, as well as financially. I don't think that any of them are. Well, I guess yeah, physical health is most important because if you're not physically healthy, none of the other areas don't really matter. But each area is important outside of that. Spiritual health is important. Physical health, mental health is highly important, and financial health is also important. So I pray that we have an all around full and complete health. Um, so we'll go ahead and just get started. Before we do get started, I'd like to open up in the name of Allah, who appeared in the person of Master Farad Muhammad, to whom we forever and ever give praise and thanks for raising a divine leader, teacher, guide, and example in the person of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. In these two great and holy names, I greet the brothers and the sisters in the universal understanding of peace of Assalamu alaikum. I pray my audio is on point. Um, let me double check real quick, so I'm not having to lean over too much. Microphone check. Microphone check. Microphone check. Here we go. So we'll just keep it just like that. So today we're just gonna go into an invincible studies, or excuse me, sun studies and invincible truth. Keeping in mind that this truth is ever so relevant. Um, I wanna remind us that in the time, biblical time of Pharaoh and Moses, when the people of Moses was going through the Exodus and they were faced, well, first off, Allah faced Pharaoh with many trials and tribulations and uh, plagues. When the people of Moses were faced with the ocean in front of them, Allah did not remove the entire ocean. He just made a way through it. And so that is the perspective and the understanding that we want to adopt, we want to embody, understanding that Allah does not remove our opposition full and complete. He makes a way through it, adversity. And through that concept of making a way through it, our embodiment eliminates our enemy. Where I'm getting that information, I bear witness that there is no God worthy of worship besides Allah, who came in the person of Master Farad Muhammad. I bear witness that the most honorable Elijah Muhammad is his messenger, and I bear witness that the lessons that our Savior Allah gave us to study and learn is the fulfillment of the prophecies of all former prophets. It says here in the first instructions given to the laborers, it says, why is stress made to the Muslims to copy the minister Elijah Muhammad's answers? The past history shows that the Almighty Allah sends prophets and apostles for the people's guide and example, and through them his mystery was revealed, and those who followed the apostle would see the light. And so that concept of seeking Allah's existence, we believe in the true and living God, not a dead spook God, that a path is made through the apostle or guide and example. Prophets and apostles were sent, and through them. So that same concept of visualizing all the corruption and evil that's happening in the world, Allah is making a way through it. In these same very lessons, it says here, lesson number 1 is said to be the student's assignment first. Lesson number 1 lays the base of our work today and gives the student a clear knowledge of himself and his heavenly home, the best part of the earth, and who is the enemy to him and his nation, and why the enemy and righteous could not live together. The enemy and righteous could not live together. We understand in science that two objects cannot occupy the same space at the same time. So the righteous and the enemy of righteous could not live together. And why was the righteous able to cast out his enemy? This teaches the student what he must do with the enemy of the righteous today. The righteous nation is now living in every part of the planet Earth. Therefore, the enemy must now be removed in every part of the planet Earth. So once we have that concept is established in the lessons, then the lessons asks why is stress made to the Muslims to copy the minister Elijah Muhammad's answers. So if we understand how a lot of brothers and sisters believe that the most honorable Elijah Muhammad was the embodiment of Moses. Now, belief is belief. Belief leaves room for doubt. And I'm not here to speak on beliefs necessarily, but rather the extraction of what these things mean. So in the Bible, we understand, and in Holy Quran, that Allah did not remove the ocean, he made a way through it. The same ocean that drowned Pharaoh, not by title, but by substance, is the same ocean that was made for Noah to be safe from. It's not necessarily, and this is what I mean by not the same ocean, but the same substance. In our prayers, we should say every day, so Allah, I seek thy refuge from anxiety and grief. These are substances that are overwhelming anxiety and grief. I seek thy refuge from lack of strength and laziness. I seek thy refuge from cowardice and niggardliness. I seek thy refuge from being overpowered by debt. Understand that concept, being overpowered by debt. Bear witness, being overpowered by debt and the oppression of men. These are substances that can drown us. We can be drowning in debt, drowning in mental disorders, mental health issues, drowning in emotional distress, anxiety, and grief. We can be drowning in our own ignorance. the significance of what the followers of Moses at that time were faced with when they were looking at the ocean, it was to signify that they had seemingly lost all hope. The path looked impossible. They didn't see any boats. How they gonna get across? So that significance is what I want to bring. Now, of course, those of us who adhere to and follow the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, we do not adapt, adopt the word adopt. We do not adopt spooky beliefs, fantasy teachings. Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad made us face reality. He brought us face to face with God, Allah, in the person of Master Farad Muhammad. And by forcing us to being face to face with Allah, God, He brought us face to face with reality. Because prior to that, we believed that God was some spook floating around in the sky, sitting on a cloud, white man with a long white beard, waving his finger and bringing things into existence. And had a son look just like him, blonde hair, blue eyes, was nailed to the cross, body went up to heaven, but stayed on earth at the same time. These are spooky beliefs. So the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad saved us, rescued us from drowning in spooky beliefs. That's the same concept. He walked us right through it. And that same substance that we were saved from is the same exact substance that Allah used to drown our opposition. So when I read these lessons and I'm studying these invincible truth and we're seeking a way through the times that we're living in, it says here that the past history shows that Allah, Almighty Allah, sends prophets and apostles for the people's guide and example, and through them his mystery was revealed. And understanding that in the message to the black man, there's a chapter that says, who is that mystery God? That mystery God, that's the same substance that we were drowning in at one point in time prior. So anything that is not in alignment with our righteousness can be viewed as a substance that is designed for our downfall, our demise, our death, and our destruction, drowning. And it says here, and those who follow the apostle would see the light. So that's in our lessons from our Savior Allah. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and move forward into our book here in Invincible Truth. These are articles written and published by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. In the article, excuse me, in the newspaper at the time was called the Pittsburgh Courier. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and take my time when we're reading these articles. I'm in no rush. I'm not in a rush to get out of here. I'm not going to waste your time and take up too much of your time, but I am going to take my time. And we are going to go through these. I want to read the back. It says here, God has given to me a very strong and invincible truth that will defend, protect, and prevent you from falling victim to the arch deceiver. Read these articles and treasure them. They are your life. Ignore them and it is your death. Your brother, Elijah Muhammad, messenger of Allah to you all. Now, I want to briefly emphasize the importance of these articles, especially in regards to today. Not only have we taken the time to align them by the date, so today is May the 18th, 2025, and this article was written in May the 18th, 1957. So not only are we in time in alignment with those articles, but we also want to be in time and in alignment with the significance and the substance of the article. The Bible, I believe, is in chapter of John 1, chapter 1, verse 1 says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. And so when we say that we want to embody the same substance of the word of the article, that's what we're talking about. That's what we're referring to. The same substance of God is the word that the most honorable Elijah Muhammad was sharing with us, the message that he was made to deliver to us from Allah, from the mouth of Allah. And so it's not just to go and review, but it's to embody and to understand the significance of that substance that was delivered to us. You know, it's like Amazon is dropping off a package. Whatever you ordered from Amazon is made to be used. You know, Dr. Yusuf Bey always taught use determines value. So if not if Allah saw it necessary to come in the person to raise one up from us to embody and deliver a message, give us his word, which we are supposed to be deeming as value. And if we're taught that the use of a thing determines its value, then how is this word useful to determine its value to us? If it's just made to sit here on the article, then it's not very valuable. And so that's the reasoning behind the studies, is to uncover the value, uncover its practicality, its use. And I'm just documenting. So when I go through these articles, I'm extracting the use so I can have access to its value in my life and the life of my family. And it's documented here publicly. So here it says on May 18th, 1957, this article is written and published. Today is May 18th, 2025. It says the American so-called Negro salvation is in Islam, the only true religion of God. Now, if you're on YouTube, you may see that the title is a little different. My intention, and it's not to say that I have good intentions. We understand that the road to hell is paved with good intention. Make sure that that noise isn't disrupting. Give me 1 second. Okay, as we proceed, okay. Thank you for bearing with me at that time. I'm gonna go ahead and if you're on YouTube, the title is not the same as the article, and the reason being is because I'm only allowed a certain number of letters for the title, and so I couldn't fit everything. So what I did was, instead of writing the whole thing, the American so-called Negroes, I put the American niggas. That's because over time, the substance, if you will, of Negro has not changed just because the title has changed. So the substance of the Negro, so-called Negro, the substance of the African American, so-called African American, the substance of the nigger, the substance of the colored, so-called colored, and the substance of the American niggas has not changed. The contents within the package has not changed regardless of the wrapping or whatever you want to call it. There's that old saying that a cat in a dog house isn't a dog, or it's not what they call you, it's what you answer to. And so all these different things may not seem exactly relevant at the time, but it has everything to do with the how the Bible says a good name is worth more than gold. So it's understanding that what you call a thing is important, but we understand that regardless of what they changed, the names, the substance was still the same. So that's why Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad had to be among us, raised by Allah in the person to give us an identity, to give us a name, a righteous name that was worth more than gold, and not just the name that we call ourselves by name, meaning like my name is Patan, but also an identity of who I am, an original man, the Asiatic black man. That reminds me of a conversation we were just having. Matter of fact, that's the whole, I think, fell under the weather because we was out there with my pops. Another brother, Key, was out there working in the rain for one of our clients, and out there working in the rain 2 days straight, and having conversations with the client, and he identified as Native American, and that opened up the conversation for a whole plethora of different viewpoints. And what it came down to is we choose our identity and then we choose how we share that identity. Just because, and that's the whole concept of the LGBT. They want to identify as a certain way, and that's your right to identify however you choose. But you can't expect somebody else to fall in line with that belief. And so if somebody is choosing that they want to call themselves a certain thing, the most we can do is share with them the truth, but they might not value the truth as much as we would. And so that's basically what I had let the brother know, is that we who follow the teachings of Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, are we don't have an identity, or we did not have an identity. So we value the identity that was given to us by Almighty God, Allah, the true and living God, who gave us the identity of the original man, so that we would not be limited to a landlocked, if you will. We're limited when we identify as African American. We're limited to a history that doesn't go further than 1776 by saying African American, because America didn't exist until 1776. And so that was a concept that my father was um, uh, conveying or demonstrating, was that how can you be native to a place that didn't exist until 1776, but your people were here long before that. Your people has been here since, quote unquote, the beginning. And that's where the misunderstanding was. But a lot of times people don't think that deep, and so they don't really want to, they don't want their identities or their fantasies shattered. And we always know there's a time and a place. But the key here is that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad gave us an identity to a people who had no identity. We were kidnapped, robbed, robbed from a knowledge of self, a knowledge of our God, our beliefs, and then force fed a different belief and a different identity. Force fed to identify as less than a man, forced to identify as colored. And when that wasn't good enough, Negroes and niggas. And then when that wasn't good enough, and they tried to give us a little bit more, started calling us Afro Americans, African Americans. And none of these speak to the truth of who we are. And it doesn't date far back enough so that we can stay and maintain connection to the origin, to the beginning. This is what the lessons ask. This is the lessons. One of those things that Christians like to quote in the Bible where Jesus says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the ending. And then here you have a man who's raised up in the wilderness of North America, the hills of North America, teaching that what is the said what is the said birth record of the Nation of Islam? The Nation of Islam has no beginning nor ending, is older than the sun, moon, and stars. Essentially saying that the black man, the Asiatic black man, has no beginning and nor ending. Essentially stating that we are the Alpha and the Omega. Now, the hard part about saying Alpha and Omega, those are Greek words, Alpha and Omega. And so, because Jesus, who was an original man, identified to us as the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the ending, instead of us being intelligent enough to go and want to uncover what it means to be the beginning and the ending, the end all be all, the maker, the owner, the cream of the planet Earth. Instead of us being curious enough to go and find that, instead we get wrapped up into Greek fraternities. Oh, Jesus said he was Alpha and Omega. So I'm gonna be Alpha Psi Theta, Theta Psi Alpha. I don't know all the Greek terms, but I do know a lot of so-called Muslims have pledged Greek fraternities. That in itself is a dichotomy or a hypocrisy if I ever heard one. So that's something to consider in the near future. So as we proceed to give you what you need, it says the poor so-called Negroes who are not Negroes but descendants of the tribe of Shabazz. Opens up straight and direct, clear as can be. Just plain, just like that. The poor so-called Negroes. Excuse me. The poor people called Negroes. Here he is saying that's what you're called. You're called Negroes. And I'm saying today, ain't nobody openly calling us Negroes, but they are calling us niggas. And not only are they calling us niggas, but we have decided amongst ourselves to call ourselves niggas and got the audacity to be mad if somebody else we'd have made nigga wanting to be so exclusive and cool and trendy and hip and shiny. That's one of the reasons why I really don't even I don't worship nobody except Almighty God. Allah came in the person of most came in the person of Master Prophet Muhammad. Excuse that Freudian slip. The only access that we have had to Allah was the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, is the most honorable Elijah Muhammad in his teachings. But the views that most people of us in our culture view Tupac, I have never. Once I watched a video of him explaining the difference between uh, niggers or Negroes and niggas, it was as if our whole identity, instead of being built around the truth from Allah, the true and living God, had now been built around some fantasy. But without getting too sidetracked, if you don't know about the way that Tupac had manipulated the words of nigga and negro, that'd be something that uh, will be worth your time to go and look into that. So it says the poor people called Negroes who are not Negroes but descendants of the tribe of Shabazz. Right there. Right there. To a people who had no identity, the man is giving us identity. It says we are descendants of the tribe of Shabazz. Shabazz means that which was there since the beginning. Are the victims of every known cruelty and evil treatment known to mankind. Through being ignorant of the knowledge of self and others, they bring a lot of it upon themselves. I'm gonna read that again. It says, through being ignorant of the knowledge of self and others, they bring a lot of it upon themselves. It's the Bible. It says, my people are, I'm looking for the exact word. Excuse my, it says, my people struggle through a lack of knowledge. It says, through being ignorant of the knowledge of self and others, they bring a lot of it upon themselves. The one and powerful God is now seeking them to believe in Him alone, that He alone will defend and deliver them once and forever from the cruel hands of those that hate and kill them daily. It also reminds me of the last article that we read 2 Sundays ago about speaking on, is God a jealous God? And prior to me taking the time to go and look up the definition of jealous, I was in disbelief. But as I went and read the definition of jealous, and it says demanding complete devotion, then I bear witness. So it says here, I'm going to read it again. The one and powerful God is now seeking them to believe in Him alone, demanding complete devotion. He alone will defend and deliver them once and forever from the cruel hands of those that hate and kill them daily. I'm going to read that again because if that's not today, I don't know what is. It says, He alone will defend and deliver them once and forever from the cruel hands of those that hate and kill them daily. Their fear and belief are not in God nor Jesus, but in the white race. Their slave masters. Were we to put all of our faith and fear in the one God, Allah, we will not suffer. Now, real quickly, I want to stop because these are the things that are constantly going on in my mind where these things that are transpiring, they're happening today, is written in the Bible. Now, I to be clear, in Message to the Black Man, quoting from the chapter, What the Muslims Believe, on page 161, says, excuse me, 163. It says, we believe in the truth of the Bible, but we believe that it has been tampered with and must be reinterpreted so that mankind will not be snared by the falsehoods that have been added to it. And so when I am referring to the Bible, it's through that lens that the most honorable Elijah Muhammad has blessed us with, that reinterpretation, viewing it from a realistic, true and living perspective and not from a spooky perspective, knowing that it is not plain and direct. We had a plain and direct messenger sent to us because that which we were previously, the substance of that which we were previously drowning in from Pharaoh, we needed a salvation and deliverance from it. So it also says that we further believe in the judgment. We believe the first judgment will take place as God revealed in America. We believe this is the time in history for the separation of the so-called Negroes and the so-called white Americans. There it is. We believe we believe the black man should be freed in name as well as in fact. By this we mean that he should be freed from names imposed upon him by his former slave masters. Isn't that Negro, niggas, colored, African Americans, Afro Americans? It's it, and not only that, but isn't that the first name that we've been given? John's son, Jack's son, James' son, Smith. These are names that I'm just coming up with, but that's what it says here. By this we mean that we should be freed from names imposed upon him by his former slave masters, names which identified him as being the slave of a slave master. When you're somebody's son, that means that they own you. We believe that if we are free indeed, we should go in our own people's names, the black people of the earth. So it's all connected. This is why I love to teach Most High Muhammad, because you start to, this is what it means in the lessons. It says, and you begin to see the light. You know, that's undeniable when you start to really, you can imagine if you're in a super dark, 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 dark room, can't see, can't even see your hand in front of you. You imagine these things. Even if you see a small window crack, just a little bit of light, it's gonna make a huge difference. And once you see that, most times, if you're tapping into the first law of nature, which is self-preservation. So self-preservation is the first law of nature. And you want to escape or come out of the darkness, you're going to gravitate towards that little bit of light. So that's what the lessons mean. You start to see the light and you walk therein. All these things have meaning. It says, their fear and belief are not in God nor Jesus. They boast in calling themselves after the names of the slave masters and citizens of America, and at the same time begging their masters for civil rights. And their so-called spiritual leaders disgracing themselves, preaching and offering up prayers to a dead prophet, Jesus, and an unknown God that they imagine is living somewhere in the skies. This reminds me today, I mean, if we're still taking the time to make it relevant to today, I don't know if any of you are on Instagram or Facebook. Um, there are people making posts, Christians, they identify as Christians. And there's a pastor, I don't remember his name. I think it's Todd, black dude, maybe so called African American. He's a pastor. And there are many quote unquote sincere Christians who have been condemning his method of preaching. And I watched a few videos. He's very feminine, and he justifies behaviors that the Bible, the Word of God, doesn't justify. He'll say things like, um, "You might pick the church that you go to based on the Word, but God picks the church that He visits based on the worship." And so that's 10% teaching the bloodsuckers of the poor, getting them excited, leading away their minds. And because the 85% poison animal eaters, hard to lead in the right direction, easily led in the wrong direction. The poison animal is not just the pig. Poison animal is that which we have made to consume, whether it be through entertainment, through knowledge. So it's not just the physical food, but it's also the spiritual food. So when it says the poison animal eaters, it's also the poison food, poison animal, poison food eating, poison spiritual food. Excuse me. Okay. So without getting too um, off topic, it says here they boast in calling themselves after the names of slave masters and citizens of America, and at the same time begging their masters for civil rights. And their so-called spiritual leaders disgracing themselves, preaching and offering up prayers to a dead prophet Jesus and an unknown God that they imagine and living somewhere in the skies. That's that spookism that we were saved from. Just like the Christians that I was just referring to, utilizing the Bible to have discernment on whether or not the pastor was telling the truth. And just like the most honorable Elijah Muhammad came with the truth and weighed it up against what we have been taught in the Bible, weighted up against what's actually in the Bible, and then teaching us about the Holy Quran and the truth that Master Farah Muhammad gave to him to give to us. One of those truths is that Islam is mathematics and mathematics is Islam and can be proven in no limit of time. The thing with mathematics is that when you are conducting math calculations and measurements, you have to have a standard unit, and the units have to be in alignment or in congruency, meaning that they have to uh, agree with one another. The standard units of measurement, for example, a yard is 3 feet. Well, 1 yard equals 3 feet. The standard there is what's telling us what the number represents. Because in math, you can't just have 1 equals 3 because that's incorrect. You can't put 1 equals 3. That's mathematically incorrect. So what happens is we have these standard units of measurement that we use to make the mathematics correct, right, and exact. Same thing with Islam. So no, just like funny that I use the 1 and 3 because Christians will say that the three gods equals one. Um, but 1 yard does equal 3 feet, and so excuse me, bear with me one moment. Thank you. Um, so 1 yard does equal 3 feet, and therein we have a standard unit, but we have to know exactly what it is that we're referring to, especially when we're doing dealings in business. Um, for example, in the United States, the measurements is on the imperial, if I'm not mistaken, the imperial system, whereas other international countries are on the metric system. So that conversion is necessary when you're doing international business. Is the conversion is necessary. Same thing with dollars and in another form of currency, because one doesn't always equal one. 1 foot doesn't equal 1 meter. 1 pound doesn't equal 1 gram or 1 kilogram. So there's a conversion that's necessary, and the conversion is necessary because there's no standard. So when we're dealing with mathematics, there must be a standard unit of measurement, and the conversion is necessary if they are not in agreement. There has to be an agreement found. Now, when the reason why I'm saying that is that when we're talking about Islam, especially in regards to Islam as taught by the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, anytime we are referring to something that's being taught, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad's teachings has to be the standard unit from which we're measuring all other things. Otherwise, no, there's no conversions. There's a misunderstanding. It's the he say, she say. This is how the Orthodox Muslims got into the Hadith, because they're not utilizing the Quran as a standard unit of measurement. So yeah, I know the Quran says this, but the Hadith, is to be made more clear, and that's what's happening with the teaching most honorable Elijah Muhammad. Is that it's not the lessons and the actual teachings word for word, right and exact, has not been the measurement anymore. Well, they point to the followers and this and that, and so I'm not wanting to cast any stones and things like that, but I do recognize where there's a mistake being made, especially on social media when there's a lot of posts that are being shared that are in contradiction, but still labeled as the teachings of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. And how would we know? How would we know if a contradiction or mistake is a mistake, yet being labeled as the teaching of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, were we not to refer back to the key or the standard unit of measurement, which is the lessons, which is the books that were left, and to a lesser degree, lectures. Because one thing that we're not able to recognize is that circumstances dictate the solutions. What I mean by that is if we're today is Sunday and it's documented here. Today is Sunday. If you were to watch this tomorrow, the circumstances of my true statement is no longer valid. The circumstances have changed. The day is no longer Sunday. Tomorrow is Monday. So that's what I mean by the circumstances dictates what is true or the solution. So when Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad is taking questions and answers on the lectures, the truth is invincible and timeless, but circumstances dictate what is true. And that's why we have to have discernment. And that's why I'm saying that the standard unit of measurement is the lessons, first and foremost. First and foremost is the lessons. And then the literature that was given to us by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And that is the way in which that we will have discernment. I'm going to read this again just to bring it 360. It says, God has given to me a very strong and invincible truth that will defend, protect, and prevent you from falling victim to the arch deceiver. Read these articles and treasure them. They are your life. Ignore them and it is your death. So when it comes to deception, only Allah knows how deep the devil is willing to go to deceive us, original people. So we got to really be in tune with what the truth is and not be led by our lowly desires because of what sounds good or what looks good or has taken on the veil or the title of truth. You know that what I mean by that is whether we go to the Bible or we go to the lessons, the essence is clear where it says that in the Bible, in the last days, Satan will masquerade as a messenger of the light. Satan will, excuse me, Satan will masquerade as a messenger of the light. Masquerade means to put on the costume or the mask of, or to um, basically be an actor in a play, where the costume, if you will, and in the lessons, it says that they use Jesus's teaching to shield their dirty religion. So that same concept of masquerading as a messenger of light or using the truth of the messenger to shield your dirty religion is the same exact concept. So when I'm referring to Islam being mathematics and having a standard unit of measurement, then we can refer this is what Dr. Yusuf Bey was teaching about judge a tree by the fruit it bears. Matter of fact, that's in the Bible. Judge a tree by the fruit it bears. Well, many of us don't realize that in the Bible about Adam was made, or no, excuse me, in the Holy Quran, Adam was made to name or be given the names of all things. So those of us who are ignorant may not have knowledge of how to even judge a tree or the fruit. What I mean by that is, I'll use myself as a perfect example. There's two trees growing right here, right outside. One is a mountain apple tree and the other is an avocado tree. Prior to them bearing fruit, I had no idea they were trees, green leaves. They look like trees. This one here on my left, even after it bore fruit, I was still ignorant. This mountain apple tree right here to my left, even after it bore fruit, I was still ignorant to the facts. I knew that it was bearing fruit, and I could say, all praises are due to Allah, it's bearing fruit. But because I had no knowledge of what type of fruit it was bearing, I don't have the knowledge to even have discernment or judgment to even say that I'm going to judge this tree by the fruit that it bears. because I didn't have knowledge of what the fruit that it was bearing. So I could be I could admire the tree because it is bearing fruit. But because I don't know what to call the fruit, I don't know what the fruit is called, then I really don't have the knowledge to properly judge the tree. And so I see that as the same concept of today is there are many messengers of the light, or says Satan will masquerade as messengers of the light, and they will bear fruits. But we don't really know the difference between the fruits of Allah and the fruits of the world, because sometimes they could look the same and we don't have discernment. For example, in the lessons, it says Allah desires for us luxury, money, good homes, and friendships in all walks of life. And so, any so called Negro with a little bit of sense and a little bit of business acumen can acquire luxury, money, good homes, and friends of all walks of life. So, just because the fruit looks the same doesn't mean that necessarily the tree is the same. The root is not the same because he's utilizing a different knowledge to generate the same exact result. Whereas when we read the lessons, when we go to the root and we actually read it and we view that word luxury, then we can actually understand. We start reading more and more into the lessons. The luxury that Master Farad Muhammad gave to us to have was not defined by the American consumerist definition of luxury. Master Farad Muhammad gave us luxury, meaning health, proper food, a way for us to be in tune with our breath, the measurement of the planet, the weight of the earth, the distance between earth and sun. These are luxuries for us to have access to tell us who we are and what we have in our genetics. He gave us the way in which atoms were to be cracked into 10 million parts, the weight of breath. Told us that because that his uncle was living other than himself, he was living a short life. This is luxury. The ability to take a deep breath and not have to stress, where we have anxiety and grief and lack of strength and laziness, where we can look at the things that we're faced with and it's causing us an early death and destruction. When we have deliverance from these things, that's a luxury that isn't defined by the American lifestyle. Consumerism, materialism, that's how we view luxury these days. Brothers riding around. And I have nothing again. I like luxury. One of my favorite vehicles that I ever had is a Cadillac, 1996, inherited from my pops. And now I understand why he didn't want it. Because when I had it, it was too much to deal with. But I don't say love, but I really enjoyed the way that the Cadillac rode. It rode like a Cadillac, power steering, sit back and leather, had my gangster lean on. So I understand that. But I don't define the luxury that Master Farad Muhammad meant for us by the American ideal. Because at the end of the day, America is not the only place that has luxury. You look at these other countries; they live in a they and in America they call these other countries third world, but the other countries look at America like a first world. Or excuse me, America looks at other countries as third world. I don't even know where that came from, and I don't like to use it third world, first world, but poverty. America looks at other countries as in poor, poverty stricken. But other countries who are doing it right look at America like it's poor. They are not doing it right. They don't take care of their people. They don't love their people. What kind of country would not give free health care to their people? What kind of country would just let homelessness run rampant without giving them a solution to do for themselves? What kind of country doesn't care for its own people? What kind of country has the concept of every uh, human being created equal, and then but not y'all Negroes, you're three-fifths, and then not y'all, we just gonna steal your land? This is hypocrisy. And so the other countries are most likely viewing the American hypocrisy, where meanwhile America's viewing the other countries as less than. That's what has to be destroyed. And so when I'm talking about the luxuries, I don't view it from the American standard. That goes back to the standard unit of measurements in mathematics that we were talking about. So I don't utilize the American standard unit of measurement. Like I said, America uses the imperial standard of measurement. They go with the feet and the inches. So when Master Fard Muhammad told us about luxury, I do not utilize the American standard. I wanted to know what is Allah's standard? What is God, the true and living God who came in the person of Master Fard Muhammad? What is his standard of luxury? Once we understood that, then all praises are due to Allah. um, so, and another way you can view that also is how the Bible says that a good name is worth more. That's a standard unit to measure. When we talk about Islam is mathematics, that means we have to know the standard. So if the Bible is saying that a good name is worth more than silver and gold, then we can understand, just like Dr. Yusuf Bey, we just said, he said that the use determines its value. Use determines value. So if the Bible, the word of God, is saying that a good name, and then he gives us the value of it, is worth. Value and worth are synonymous. Value is how you can identify, how you can measure its worth. So the Bible is saying that a good name is worth more. The value is more than silver and gold. So that means that a name has more use than silver and gold. Now that's interesting. So what use is a name? I guess we got to keep reading to find out. Praise due to Allah. So it says here, they boast in calling themselves after the names of the slave masters and citizens of America. They boast in calling themselves after the names of the slave masters and citizens of America, and at the same time begging their slave masters for civil rights, and their so called spiritual leaders disgracing themselves, preaching and offering up prayers to a dead prophet Jesus and an unknown God that they imagine is living somewhere in the skies. When one enemy mistreats them, they seek refuge in the enemy's brother that they may punish their brother for the wrongs done to them. This shows how blind and ignorant the poor so called Negroes' spiritual leaders are. They sell themselves to be the friends of the enemies of their own people to oppose their own salvation, thus becoming agents of the slave masters against their own people. They are leading themselves and their poor, blind, deaf, and dumb people to destruction. May Allah help me to open their eyes before it is too late. So, one thing I can't even encompass the full value of a name, but something that the most honorable Elijah Muhammad is giving us a hint at the value of a name is that when the slave master names his slave, he's taking ownership over that slave. So he gives us a name that we're called so that he can take ownership and responsibility over us. So if Allah, in the person of Master Farah Muhammad, came himself and raised up the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, who was previously formerly known as by the slave man name Elijah Poole, stripped him of that degradation and gave him his own name. Does that not mean that the value of Allah giving him a name means that Allah is now taking responsibility and ownership over his messenger? And does that not also mean that when Allah, in the person of Master Farah Muhammad, through his messenger, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, stripping us of our slave names and giving us his own name, does that not mean that Allah is also taking responsibility and ownership over us by giving us the identity of the Asiatic black man, the original man? Does that not mean that Allah is taking responsibility and ownership over us, taking away our slave names and giving us names of God and attributes of God? That to me is not only value, use, but also a luxury. It feels great to know that we are in the responsibility and the ownership of the true and living God based off of the name that he has given us. It says here, they need the help of the one God, Allah, who is now with outstretched arms, willing and able to help us all. The slave masters gladly put them on their air. Excuse me. The slave masters gladly put them on the air to preach, shout out their ignorance to the public. Any government that has respect for its religion wouldn't allow any ignorant, one that doesn't know the true meanings, person to represent it to the public. That's what we were referring to before, that pastor that is on um, Instagram and Facebook, and he sometimes he dresses very feminine, speaks very feminine. I don't remember his name. I think it's Pastor Todd, but you have a lot of Christians who are uh, chastising him or condemning him publicly for the deception that he pushes. Where this is the same thing that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad is teaching. It says the slave masters will gladly put them on the air to preach, gladly to shout out their ignorance to the public. Any government that has respect for its religion wouldn't allow any ignorant, one that doesn't know the true meanings, person to represent it to the public. What Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad is telling us is that this very country doesn't even have respect for its own religion of Christianity. It doesn't even have respect for its own religion of Christianity because it allows these preachers to stand up in the public and deceive them. It says, of all the histories on people being enslaved by others, never have you read where the slaves loved and worshiped their slave masters, but the so-called Negroes who live under death from the enemy, beaten and killed in the public like wild animals, and they never are recognized in the slave master's so-called courts of justice as an equal citizen of the land. The smart enemies keep their eyes and ears open on the so-called Negroes night and day, seeking an excuse to kill them. The lack of love, unity, and self-respect among us is one of our greatest enemies. Love your black, brown, yellow, and red brothers as thyself. Do good by each other. Never think of shedding the blood of your own kind. Treat all human beings right as you are the righteous. Then do righteous by all. But if we do good only to self and evil to others, we can't be called the righteous. The above said must not be taken to mean that we should love the devils, but do righteous and justice according to the law of justice. Now, I want to really briefly stop for this moment and recognize the full embodiment of not only the person, but the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad to be a fulfillment from Moses all the way to Jesus. And what I mean by that is there's a misunderstanding between the difference between the Old Testament and New Testament. And the reason being is because it's that divide and conquer situation. Whereas to say that the Old Testament is a certain way and the New Testament is a different way. And the way that it has been taught to us is there is a division between the two. It's like the older generation versus the newer generation. And as generations pass, were it not for the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, where it says in Malachi chapter 4, I, the Lord, will send Elijah who will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to the fathers. There was a unification between generation of father and children where there was none before. So the same concept herein lies the embodiment of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad himself was the embodiment of that unification between Old Testament and New Testament. And this statement that he made here is a bearing of witness to that unification. In the Old Testament, Moses taught an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, meaning cause and effect. Somebody does X to you, then you do exactly X back. An eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. And so prior to the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, we were not taught that. We were not taught cause and effect. Cause and effect is a law of the universe. We were not taught that. We were taught the quote unquote New Testament of Jesus. where Jesus said, "Well, somebody smack you on your left cheek, turn them and give them the right. Turn the other cheek. If somebody hit you, don't hit them back. Just forgive them. Love your enemies." It's all that cushy, soft, sensitive teaching. Love everybody. If somebody steals from you and he steals your shirt, give him your cloak too. Matter of fact, give him your pants. Somebody steals $1 from you, give him $100. And so, because the teaching was isolated and given to us, that's that poison animal eating, the poison teaching, easily led in the wrong direction, hard to lead in the right direction. Those preachers who were teaching us taught us lies and only isolated and picked what would benefit him and not us as a people. Well, the way that the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, and actually the truth of it is in the Bible, Jesus actually and factually said, "I have not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it." And he was speaking in reference to the law of Moses. And this is what is meant by fulfilling. So when the most honorable Elijah Muhammad is telling us the lack of love, unity, and self-respect among us is one of our greatest enemies. Love your black, brown, yellow, and red brothers as thyself. Do good by each other. Never think of shedding the blood of your own kind. Treat all human beings right as you are the righteous. Then do righteous by all. But if we do good only to self and evil to others, we can't be called the righteous. Now, if we were to isolate that statement and say, "Oh, hold on, uh, no disrespect, but hold on, Muhammad, what you mean? How can you teach eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, and now you saying never think of shedding the blood of your own kind? What if he shed my blood? Don't I have every right to shed his blood?" And this is what it's meant here. Then do righteous by all. But if we do good only to self and evil to others, we can't be called the righteous. And so this is the complete joining of the two laws, where if our base within the Moses's law, cause and effect, if that base is solidified, which the most honorable Elijah Muhammad did an excellent job of solidifying that base of cause and effect, being in tune and intimate with the laws of the universe. And then after that base was set, we were able, all praises are due to Allah, most honorable Elijah Muhammad was able to elevate us spiritually, where we identify as the righteous. So what he is saying is, if we do good only to self and evil to others, we can't be called righteous. So just because evil has done to us doesn't mean you return evil with evil. An eye for an eye, absolutely. Now, this is the thing. I was just thinking about this too. Just because you forgive somebody doesn't mean that you can't demand the justice that is due to you. Forgiveness is for you so that you don't carry it in your heart. But you can still demand that that person is chastised with the justice that is demanded by their action. The law of cause and effect is still in effect, but the forgiveness is for your own personal well being. So if somebody does you wrong, I forgive you, but you still finna get your ass whooped. That's the completion. Because when the preachers taught us, forgive your enemies, but they didn't tell us that we had a solid base, though. Our solid base is with the teaching most honorable Elijah Muhammad, and this time, Moses. This is the Jews, so the so-called Jews, they follow the law of Moses, but they don't believe in Jesus at all. And the Christians, they believe in Jesus, but they have neglected the law of Moses. And so this was the value and the use of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, is a embodiment and fulfillment of those two laws, Moses and Jesus. Because it is true, if your heart is pure and your foundation is set, and your brother comes and steal from you, maybe at that time you may have the spiritual development That's what it requires, spiritual maturity and development to say, "You know what? He obviously needed it more than I did." Now, this is why the Holy Quran is so beautiful, because the Holy Quran states, "You have every right. You have every right to seek justice," meaning if someone does you wrong, to demand that it be made right. You have every right to do that. However, you also have the suggestion from Allah to forgive, because forgiveness is better on the heart. That is contrary to what was taught to us from the preachers, because the preachers are saying, no, 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 love your enemies. No, 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 no. Yeah, they killing you, but don't, no, no, no. Don't try to get them back, because we gotta love our enemy. We gotta be better than them. That's wrong if you don't have the base, if you don't have a solid foundation. If you don't have spiritual enhancement, you just turn you easily led in the wrong direction, hard to lead in the right. Knowledge, ignorant to the knowledge of self. Sheep led to the slaughter. So this is what it is. This is what the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad is. Again, going back to the lessons where it says, "Why is stress made?" To copy the minister Elijah Muhammad's answers. The past history shows that the Almighty Allah sends prophets and apostles for the people's guide and example, and through them his mystery was revealed. So we have to be able to acknowledge and understand that what the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad was doing was taking us on a journey through a process, a program of spiritual development. So we can't just isolate what he taught and saying that this is it, because it is it if we're speaking on a course of action. It's it if we're speaking on a process of spiritual enhancement, of like how the Holy Quran speaks on the attributes of Allah. By developing our characters and embodying the attributes of Allah, if we can view it as a process of character development and a process of developing as civilized human beings, then yes, absolutely. But to isolate it as a quote here and a quote there, and just, you know, look at it like a museum and it looks pretty, and you look at it and it's encapsulated behind the glass, and then you go back home and forget about it, then nah, forget about it. Okay. So I don't want to go off on too many other tangents. But it says here, love your black, brown, yellow, and red brothers as thyself. Do good by each other. Never think of shedding the blood of your own kind. Treat all human beings right as you are the righteous, then do righteous by all. But if we do good only to self and evil to others, we can't be called the righteous. And we have many people in history to show and prove that they may do good to, for example, the so called Jews. I'm sure amongst their own community, they do right to one another. They keep the wealth within themselves and they look after each other. And in that concept, they have made a good example for us to learn the strategies of wealth. But that doesn't mean that they're an example of the developed character that we should embody. They're not more civilized than what the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad has come to make us, to bring us upright. Just because they have the ability to generate wealth for their community does not mean that they are upright and civilized individuals. And we have to stop confusing the two. This is what I was referring to about the way that we're looking at the trees and not even knowing the fruit. Just because somebody comes among us and has bore these fruits that are shiny. Just because they have the things that we may want doesn't necessarily mean that they're giving us the things that we be willing to do, that we should be willing to do. And so that really requires a lot of discernment. It says, but if we do good only to self and evil to others, we can't be called the righteous. It says, the above said must not be taken to mean that we should love the devils, but do righteous and justice according to the law of justice. Right? So that again, what is being said is very clear. That don't mean that we love our enemies. Just because the preachers was always saying love your enemies and love God love everybody. No, God don't love everybody, so we not expected to love everybody. However, that doesn't mean that we're going to embody the same devilishment done to us onto them. Do you know? Think about that in reality, right? For example, in a real way as a people, do you know how evil by substance, how evil it would be for us to do to another people what has been done to us? It will require us to be equally as evil, thereby eliminating all the work that Almighty God Allah has done on us surgically by removing the devil from our mind. These devils kidnapped us from our homes and made us to work and did every single type of evil. For us to do something similar, it will require us to be equally as evil, thereby not being able to be righteous. So that's what the lessons is referring to when it says we might as well just remove them from the planet. So it doesn't cause us to dive. The lesson says, and not fall victim to the devil's civilization. That's how it refers to in the lessons, not falling victim to the devil's civilization. So it's not just being falling victim is not just um, being penalized or having the consequences, but also becoming them, taking on their system of values or their system of government or in the ways in which that they rule or deal with politics. That's falling victim to the devil's civilization. So it's not as easy as just saying, "Oh, you're gonna go to hell right along with them," because that is true. But it's also not continuing the ways in which that they operate. So that's what the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad is saying. The above said must not be taken to mean that we should love the devils, but do righteous and justice according to the law of justice. God does not love the devil, but his work of righteousness and justice extends over all. It's better to just remove them from the planet so that we do not fall victim to their way of life. Again, in the lessons, it says, why does the devil not let us in his social equality? Because he is filthy in all his ways. He doesn't want us to know how filthy he is in all his ways. He knows that when we learn about him, we will run him from among us. These talking about use determines value. That is the use and value of these lessons. It says here, um, do you bid me serve others than Allah, O ye ignorant ones? And certainly it has been revealed to thee and to those before thee. If thou associate with Allah God their work, um, if thou associate with Allah God, their work would certainly come to naught, and thou wouldst be a loser. Nay, but serve along and be of the thankful. The whole earth will be in his grip on the day of resurrection at the present time, and the heavens rolled up in his right hand. Hurry and join on to your own. Just write me and say, I believe. Write me down on the book of life. So I believe, write me down on the book of life. Okay. So I recognize that that was a lot. And we definitely don't want to overload your receiving circuits. Receiving circuits, not circus, receiving circuits. Um, so I pray you were able to find value based on the use of these teachings. Before we head out, I'm going to open it up for questions, comments, concerns, discussions, dialogues, whatever have you. Do we have any questions, comments, concerns? I do have a few people here. Thank you for joining me thus far. Congratulations for making it this far. It means your attention span is on point, a little bit larger than 15 seconds, which is the average attention span in the United States of America. In the wilderness of North America, the average attention span is only 15 seconds. So I congratulate you, excuse me. Thank you. So, if there are no questions, comments, concerns, now is the time um, to go ahead and get into those. If not, I will leave you as I came. Never forget, according according to the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, never forget you are the righteous, the best, and the powerful. Never forget. That's straight from the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. You are the righteous, the best, and the powerful. And not only that, but he gave us a unit of measurement to let us know how we can be righteous. We love for our brother what we want for ourselves. We don't seek harm, death, or destruction on ourselves or our people, our brothers or sisters. And we do not return evil with evil. We separate from the devil, knowing he gonna kill himself. So I leave as I came in the universal understanding of peace. We say in the Arabic language of Assalamu alaikum.